Hello and welcome to Talkernate History, the podcast where we,
Matt
and Max, talk about works of alternate history scenarios, and history in general. It's another fan-submitted short story episode. I think this is number 4 at this point.
3 or 4.
I think it's 4.
Well, which is great because it shows you how many awesome stories we got and how much
gosh.
we've enjoyed reading these. You all are so creative
I know.
and excellent writers.
It's amazing. It's amazing. After this one, we'll either do more short stories or maybe we'll do something else. We'll see.
We'll figure it out.
But this time we got a nice little crop of stories. Some of them by people we know quite well, actually.
Yes.
But we'll get to that later.
Okay. Yes, we will.
This first story is about one of our favorite subjects, an episode I'm very proud of, the Falklands.
Yes.
The Falklands conflict.
Who knew you could get so much mileage out of this, like this little war that's almost a joke to some people now.
You know, the Falklands are the key to all this.
1982, that's where everything revolves around those Falklands.
It was the turning
those
point.
Franklins, I mean.
Or the Roosevelt Islands, as per the War of 92.
The War of 95, yeah.
95,
the Roosevelt Islands, love it.
Fantastic. The story in question is Failure at the Falklands by Oisín Power.
So it's written kind of in the style of Billy Mitchell's Overt Act, which is one of my favorites styles, as I've said before. Like, I really love that. And and I give credit to anyone who writes a story like that, because it's actually harder, I think, to write a story like that, because you have to be even more creative than usual.
Yeah.
So it starts with an excerpt from the cross-examination of Martin Bormann by Sir Hartley Shawcross at Nuremberg. But Nuremberg appears to be happening in the 1970s.
Yeah. That doesn't become clear until later. There's Bormann. There's also Speer. He's being interviewed as well. Speer.
Albert Speer.
Like the Graf Spee. Yeah.
Sort of. But pronounced similar.
Yeah, that weird thing, that weird way.
German. What a fun language.
Basically, apparently both of these guys ran to Argentina, and they had been working for the Perón administration. They mentioned the late Perón.
Oh, the late one Perón.
He didn't make it.
And Hartley Shawcross, by the way, was the chief British prosecutor at Nuremberg. And he actually died like only about 15 years ago. He was like in his hundreds.
Hundreds plural, past 100?
I think he was like 102 or 103. He lived quite a long time.
Very nice. Very nice.
So it talks about, and both of them are like, Speer is very defiant. You know, he's just like, do whatever. Do your worst.
I love bad guy Speer. Just like jerk Speer.
Especially because Speer kind of did this whole thing in the aftermath of World War II of like, I was just taken in by this thrall of Hitler, you know?
Just a babe in the woods.
Yes. And he was like a businessman. He died in London on a business trip in like 1980 or 81 or something like that.
Natural causes or just...
I think like heart attack or something. Because he was younger-ish. He was born in like probably like 1905-ish, somewhere around there. He was not a World War I veteran. He was too young to have served. But old enough. He was in that weird span of people, well, maybe not weird to them, who were not too young to have fought in World War I, but kind of on the old edge for World War II, but a lot of them probably served anyway, maybe not in like combat positions.
Maybe he was killed by Soviet agents. Oh, conspiracy.
Maybe. Who knows?
You ever see the movie Wild Geese 2?
No, but I've seen Wild Geese 1.
Yeah, that's the good one. I watched Wild Geese 2 because I was like, I wonder what this is. And it's crazy.
Oh God.
It's like we gotta break Rudolf Hess out of prison because the Soviets are trying to kill him. What? He has to give an interview.
An interview for what?
And it's stupid. It is the
interview about that fun time he flew to Scotland in 1941 to try and make Britain surrender. Huh.
Yeah. And Patrick Stewart's in it.
Oh boy,
is a Soviet guy. Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad.
Well, I'm sure the paycheck was nice.
Yeah.
So. Excuse me. Sorry, working through a cold here. No COVID.
It's not contagious through the internet. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's right. You're listening to an electronic recording of my voice, so it doesn't really matter regardless. So basically, the divergence in this story involves a very large number of Germans escaped to Argentina in 1945.
Apparently by submarine.
Yes, by submarine. Martin Bormann, Albert Speer, Alfred Jodl.
Donitz.
My God, the Allies just really, they whiffed so bad. They tried to bunt and it just flew right over their head.
And not just people escaped, but also equipment.
Yeah, he talks about how a passport was so valuable that people would be willing to bring along some KR-98Ks or some Panthers in exchange for an Argentine passport. And it's like, well, it's one thing for an individual with carrying like a bag to try and escape into a country. It's a whole different story for someone to bring a Panther tank or plurals into a country. However, did you see recently in Germany, they were prosecuting a guy who had a Panther tank in his basement.
What?
And he was like in his 80s, and they asked his neighbors, they're like, hey, did you know he had this? And they're like, yeah, like back in the 70s when it would snow a lot, he'd use it as a snowplow. So he'd drive it out and plow the snow. And it's like, no one said anything. No one paid attention
That's
or
awesome.
minded that this man was driving around a fucking tank in Germany in the 70s. And no one said anything. By the way, Panther tank, and this is the 70s, so we're only 30 years after the war, so there's plenty of people around who knew exactly what that was.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. So maybe this story's on to more than...
Okay. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
They're bringing in their Panthers.
They're tractors. We're bringing farm equipment.
Yeah.
You know.
This is a barrel.
Yeah. Well, they're shipping them separately.
Yeah, the gun separately. This is my giant grain container.
It's irrigation.
88 millimeters of grain containing.
I'm firing shells full of grain.
That's right.
Long distance.
That's right. I'm feeding the Paraguayans.
The Chileans.
So, but the next part of it, you get to this combat report from the San Carlos bomb alley. So this is May of 1972. Yeah. And the British have landed at San Carlos. They're trying to retake the island. So obviously Argentina has invaded 10 years earlier.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And Max, why don't you continue with this next?
Oh, it's great. The way it's written is pretty good. There's even like redacted names and stuff, which is
like it was an actual combat report, like someone made a public records request.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also an advantage because then the author doesn't have to like find a real person from history or make somebody up. It's just blank.
Clever.
But anyway, they land at San Carlos, which famously was Bomb Alley, a place where they were under attack quite a bit. A couple ships sunk there, for instance. In this, they also get bombed, but they're not being bombed by like Mirage jets or whatever. They're getting bombed by Stukas.
Yes.
Lots and lots of Stukas.
The JU-87.
Which is, a bit silly, but it's actually, I think, kind of an interesting point because in real life, during the Falklands War, the Argentinians had this thing called the Pucara, which is like a counterinsurgency ground attack propeller plane. Yeah. And I remember Max Hastings was talking about how it was a big failure not using those. They didn't really use them at all.
They used them a little bit, but not to the extent they should have, because they actually were better. They were harder to shoot down.
Yeah, yeah. And the Harriers could not be everywhere at once. So
and they also were too slow. That's is they were too, the Harrier is a jet designed to fight jets. Mm-hmm. It's too fast to shoot down a propeller plane.
I remember in the in Settling Accounts near the very end, not
Jonathan Moss.
Jonathan Moss. Yeah, he's in his Screaming Eagle, the copy of the Me-262, and he's trying to shoot down like this biplane, like this Polikarpov style biplane, and he can't do it because it's too slow.
Yeah.
It's like
yeah. And the funny thing is that these Ju-87s, they actually do a lot of damage, and it says that the British Sea Slugs can't lock onto them.
The Sea Slug, yes.
The mighty Sea Slug.
It's back.
The plane's either too fast or too slow for them. The mighty Sea Slug. And the funny thing the thing is that it's actually a good point. Like a Stuka is an incredibly slow plane, and even certain late model Allied propeller fighters would have had trouble shooting them down because they were so slow. Because this is a plane that's really designed in the 30s.
Right, right.
And my God, it's
during the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah, they're using the Spanish Civil War, and it's 1972, and they're still using them. Granted, these must be Argentinian copies because I don't know how the hell people were going to ship a bunch of Stukas over.
Yeah, and maybe they've been upmoded, upgraded or whatever, kind of like the Super Tucano or whatever.
I don't know if they have the range also to get all the way from Argentina to the Falklands to the back.
But here's the thing. The Argentinians are on the Falklands. They took it.
That's right, yeah.
So they have, maybe they transferred it from aircraft carriers to land-based airstrips. Yeah. I don't know.
Hans Ulrich Rudel, the famous Stuka pilot, is leading them, which is pretty funny.
Yes, that's awesome. How old? He was only 36, I think they say in the story. So
56.
56, sorry.
Well, I think he died in the 80s.
be a baby in
Yeah.
World War II. What am I saying?
I think he died in the 80s. So this is conceivable that he would obviously be alive in 72.
Sure. So yeah, the Stukas tear them to pieces. They're also torn to pieces by 88s.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Argentinians wear coal scuttle helmets and field gray uniforms, which is pretty funny.
Yep. No word on whether they have STG-44s or something like that. That'd be nice.
Well, they mentioned KR-98Ks earlier, which is pretty funny that they'd still be using.
This almost like World War I era. I know that they were upmoded for World War II, but still.
But the British break out. They manage to force their way out. They get some gunships. Some, I guess, gunboats come in and help them. And an Argentinian manages to hit one with a Panzerschreck, which is pretty funny.
When we first read that, we thought like gunships. They're like helicopters.
Maybe, I guess it could be. It says HMS Fearless. I guess it could be helicopters.
Yeah, helicopter carrier.
Man, that's a good shot to hit a helicopter with a Panzerschreck.
Unguided missile. But that's basically what a blowpipe is the world's worst man-pad.
The mighty blowpipe. Well, the British managed to force their way out. They break out all the way to Goose Green.
It's like poetry, yes.
I know. I love and then they get to Goose Green and the Argentinians are dug in. But then wait, they're attacked. The second para is attacked by 19 king tigers that were hiding in a barn.
In one barn.
That the British overlooked. Oh my God.
The barn must be the size of an aircraft hangar. Or
yes.
something.
Oh my God. It's like the biggest barn on earth. And how did you not search? The military is trained even in 1972 to search any building just so people can't do exactly what happens here where they break out behind you.
I mean, it's the Falkland Islands, so there's nowhere to hide anywhere other than crappy little shacks.
Also, barn, they don't really grow any food. I mean, they don't grow like wheat
sheep.
there. Sheep, I guess a sheep.
Yeah,
the world's biggest sheep shearing shed is actually... I love the king tigers still hanging out.
It's like that Battle of the Bulge movie. There's just king tigers everywhere. Oh my God.
You mean patents everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So the British lose, and the next is a translation of a television speech by Juan Perón talking about this amazing victory, the Malvinas, Argentina, the British have surrendered.
Yes. And we need to thank the National Socialist Refugee Council, headed by Martin Bormann, for their great contribution.
Yeah. I mean, my God, who didn't escape? I guess Hitler. It sounds like Hitler, Himmler, and Goebbels.
The jury's still out on him, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank Signor Schroner,
Ferdinand Schorner, who is a field marshal, German Feldmarschall. Yeah. No Rommel, though. Yeah. St. Rommel got left behind, I guess.
Well, the bomb plot or whatever was his undoing.
Well, maybe, who knows?
Yeah, it's true. It doesn't really go into any detail about World War II. So
there's hints that it kind of ended similar when we read about when we start talking about the next thing, which is 1974 election. Ted Heath, Prime Minister, defeated by Margaret Thatcher. That Labourite, Margaret Thatcher.
New Labour, yes.
Here's New Labour led Margaret Thatcher defects from the Tories from the Conservative Party, joins Labour and unseats Ted Heath, and she runs on this anti-fascist platform with a strong safety net for veterans. She talks about how, like, in the Second Great War, how we bled in France to fight the Germans. So there's some indication that the war ended in a similar fashion.
And she's very friendly with the Soviet Union because she feels totally betrayed by the United States and all the other powers of NATO for not stepping in to help them in Argentina. Which really begs the question, why didn't the United States step in to help them? I mean,
or why didn't the Israelis try and assassinate all these people?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And also, Argentina has a very, very substantial Jewish population, like the largest in South America by far, and probably one of the top 10 largest in the world, is my recollection.
Interesting.
There's probably over 100,000 Jewish people in Argentina, which is pretty substantial.
I did not know that.
So who knows? But either way, so Margaret Thatcher is on this rip-roaring, rampage of revenge. Revenge. And it talks about Anthony Blair, the baby of the house, 21 years old, being elected on the passionate platform of, we must bring them the bomb before they can bring the bomb to us.
We have to stop WMDs in Argentina. Yes.
Love it.
Tony
I love that.
The Tiger.
This is I have a soft spot for British politics. So I love someone who really, this is good.
Yes, me too. I remember I watched the night Nick Clegg lost live on television, and it was
He's a very
amazing.
sensitive man.
He was crying. He was crying when he lost. And he lost to this boy. He looked like a teenager.
And I've actually seen him in person from a distance.
Oh my
and
goodness.
I've seen David Cameron in person from a distance too. I won't say how.
Okay. Yeah, it's still top secret.
It's confidential.
Yeah, state service.
I mean, that was back when I was the king of Netherlands. But he comes off exactly as he does.
He works for Facebook now.
Yeah. He also loves to cry. He's a very sensitive man.
Oh. You also met one of the Miliband's, didn't you?
David
Miliband, yeah.
Former foreign secretary. Long time ago, though.
Yeah.
He also works. He lives in the U.S. now.
Really? Interesting.
Walked by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Cosmo Lang. Interesting. No, not that one.
He's been dead about 70 years by that point. So,
very nice. Did Mr. Miliband call you a pleb?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was in his way.
Yeah. Get out of my way.
Get out of my way.
I need my coffee.
That's right. I'm going to go join the SNP just to punish you. I'm going to join Plaid Cymru. Yay! Independence for Wales. Great idea. That's going to work out great, guys.
I'm going to join the Respect Party.
Oh, God.
Yeah. That guy.
I love in England how, there actually are several small parties. There's a Green Party person from Brighton who just every year is just...
And they get elected. They're actual politicians, unlike in America where weirdo parties are
There is a Prohibition Party in America, which I love.
We'll be talking about Prohibition later. But yeah.
Bring it back. The demon rum.
Alcohol is evil.
So love this.
Thatcher's on the warpath.
Yeah. Front page of Pravda, November 5th, 1974. Remember, the 5th of November. Death blow to the rat slayer is what it says.
Brezhnev is giving a speech about...
To compliment Comrade Thatcher.
Yeah. Brezhnev, who's probably barely mentally functioning at this point.
Talking about the eradication of the Hitlerite threat. The last 3 months, the joint British-Soviet forces have engaged the fascist menace of Argentina on sea and by air.
Speaking of which, apparently the first invasion force was the Special Boat Service.
Love it. Which,
fantastic. Yes. Very good.
The entire nation has been in flames with fruitless assaults from the Nazi menace against the united armies of Britain and Russia, fighting in the streets of Buenos Aires.
It implies that but it basically says they use nuclear weapons.
Yeah, they go to Cordoba, the last remains, and it says Comrade Thatcher of the United Socialist Kingdom.
Absolutely cursed, 100%.
I love that name. Of course, what sort of janky name would you come up with like that? Took the brave decision of unleashing the full and total power of the atom upon the final reactionary layer.
Very brave.
Love it.
People's tribunals are set up to judge the
said to show the fairness of Soviet arbitration. And I just in my head imagining binding arbitration. It's you sign a contract.
Judge duty. Big Sugar Ray.
You get to pick one arbitrator and we get to pick another, and then there'll be a neutral third party. No.
The Hitlerite scum. But these people are being brought back to the continent to have a second Nuremberg trial. But Nuremberg is in West Germany, though.
Yeah, it is. Well, because it was in Franconia, northern Bavaria.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's in East Germany in this world. I mean,
who knows? Yeah, we don't know. Maybe the Soviets got farther because all the German leaders are time to go. Going to Argentina.
Bye. See you.
So I love this story. Great. It's really short and actually very, very compact. Oh, Hans Ulrich Rudel apparently got killed in the fighting.
Oh, yeah.
Talks about that.
Yeah.
I really like this story. Great job. Is it entirely realistic that Stukas are still being used? No, but you know what? I know we've talked about how we love sort of to the bone, realistic alternate history. I love some of that. And if you really want to write it professionally, you want to write the Peter Seurat sort of stuff, I get it. But I love the fun. I just don't... No aliens, no magic, just nothing too ridiculous. But this is so much fun. I love this.
And plus, there is a comedic tone to it as well. So you can get away with maybe, slightly sillier things, A couple of tiny points of constructive criticism. So they talk about troops carrying around Sea Slug missile launchers. The Sea Slug was a ship-based missile, so you can't really... the HMS Glamaugen, there's a video on YouTube you can watch of the launch system. A person cannot carry that around.
Maybe they've sized it down.
Yeah, sure. The garden slug.
The garden slug.
Yes, the
mighty garden slug.
The man portable sea slug. That'd be cool. And they defeat the land forces on the Falklands, but you still got the British Navy out there. So maybe they got some what are they? The Type 23 submarines or whatever out there that are like.
The British have eradicated Argentinian shipping around the world. Now, this is a great story. It's fun, and it plays off of the unfortunate reality, which is a lot of people did make it to Argentina. Though it seems like in this world, people are just like, well, they got to Argentina, can't do anything about it. It seems like, it is a little unrealistic in the sense that then they're living pretty openly, apparently.
Yeah, well, they're
maybe in this world, they lived underground until right beforehand or something like that, know.
Okay. It's like Star Wars with the First Order or whatever. They just come out of nowhere.
Oh, George.
George had nothing to do with that.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, what's his name? JJ.
JJ.
Oh, JJ.
So, great story. Let's move on to the next one.
Yes. American Surreal by Michael Alberta. I wonder if this guy's not American, with a name like Alberta.
A fine Calgary. Fine place.
Yeah.
Edmonton. Never been there. Just commenting.
Professional wrestling.
Edmonton has what used to be the world's largest mall.
Really?
It had like a giant theme park inside of it and submarine ride.
Submarine ride, really? Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I don't think it's there anymore.
Yeah. I guess it makes sense to have malls in places where it gets extremely cold because then all these buildings are connected.
Yeah.
And
and a lot of really cold places like in Minneapolis or Toronto and all that or Montreal, they have like underground tunnels that connect buildings.
I'll be darned.
Which is a really smart idea because who the hell wants to walk around in negative 10 Fahrenheit weather.
Real. Oh, my goodness.
It's actually dangerous to walk around for too long on that.
Mm-hmm. It's like the National Mall. There's tunnels that connect the Capitol building with other stuff. I don't really know the details. But
Arlington.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Robert E. Lee's house. We have to go there.
That's right.
The true White House, American Surreal. So this is a pretty cool story. This is like this is an American-centric story. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that one short story we read. I think it was one of the alternate generals, or maybe it was alternate warriors, where Custer is president. And there's that investigative journalist who's
it's Mark Twain, Sam Clemens.
Oh yeah, him. Yeah.
You probably don't remember because it lacked the finesse of a Mark Twain sex scene that they had in How Few Remain. Something that nobody asked for. Just saying, Harry, if you're listening, no one asked for it.
Oh my God. What's his wife's name again? I'm trying to remember.
I forget.
It's like Olympia or something like that. Yeah, Mark Twain sex scenes and Mark Twain death scenes are the mark of truly great.
Yes, we'll get to the Mark Twain death.
Yeah, later. But yeah, it kind of feels a little bit like that. So in this, this is all about the American Populist Party, the populist movement. This is something I only know a little bit about, but there was like a grassroots political movement among farmers in like the late 1800s, early 1900s that was actually, it was...
You shall not crucify our country on a cross of gold, Max.
William Jennings Bryan, yeah. The silver standard and the gold standard, all that stuff makes my head hurt trying to like figure out what the hell even that stuff means.
I only use Dogecoin these days. So.
I'm a bimetalist, personally.
I agree. Yes, silver, my God.
Both of them. Gold and silver. But it was actually a really influential political movement. And, obviously people think of it mostly because of Theodore Roosevelt and the whole Bull Moose Party thing. Well, in this universe, Theodore Roosevelt wins the election of 1912. I don't quite remember how. Maybe Taft has a heart attack while golfing, the classic.
Good old Taft.
Yeah, I love him so much. He's so great. But anyway, TR wins, but he betrays the progressive populist cause.
No. He
sells out farmers and he sells out labor, and that causes a lot of...
He pitchforked us in the back.
The sickle in the back.
The sickle in the back.
So, there's a lot of resentment, and a lot of the populists get radicalized by this, and they go further to the left and kind of associate with like a bunch of socialist causes and whatnot. And I think they have William Jennings Bryan again, or I don't quite remember the details. But anyway, they also talk about how they have this thing called the Second Ocala Demands.
Yes.
And I'm like, this must be real. So I look it up, and it is in fact real. It was like some kind of meeting where they set the party plank the party pillars, and it was all about like silver standard stuff and price controls, and we need to set up farmer banks for loans, kind of boring stuff. This one's pretty much the same thing.
Alternate secretaries of agriculture.
Yes. Well, Henry Wallace, he's a secretary of agriculture, and he was a populist progressive guy.
Henry Wallace, you're under arrest for treason against the United States. Yay, Douglas MacArthur saves America.
The Constitution is saved, yes.
Well, the U.S. joins World War I in 1915.
Yes.
TR drags us into the war early.
Yeah. And later on, it talks about there's some kind of conspiracy theory that it was because there's some kind of ship sinking, kind of like a Lusitania sort of thing.
False flag.
A false flag, yes. That the British and Theodore Roosevelt colluded to get America to join the war early or something like that. No indication whether it's true or not, but it's just a popular conspiracy theory. One small thing about the Ocala demands, just to go back, the only difference between the first and second Ocala demands in this story is that in the second one, they demand to have direct election of senators, which means that amendment.
It didn't pass the 20. I forget which number amendment didn't pass.
It must have been before Prohibition, right?
It was 1913.
1913.
Yeah, okay. Because the first senators were directly elected right before World War I.
Albert Bacon Fall, for instance.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Just the other system. Why is that a better system? The legislature elects.
Yeah, I mean, because ultimately, it's the same thing, I want local elected officials to then elect my guy for me. Like, why not do it directly?
It's more like the British style, I'm really voting for the party, and whoever their candidate is in my constituency will then go elect the person they've all promised to elect as prime minister.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's other changes too?
Because I just think that Gordon Brown was just so charismatic, so great.
He did something with gold, I remember. He sold off. He went off the gold standard or something stupid. I don't know.
I don't know.
Gold. Anytime people
Scotsman being prime minister,
it's
a
not,
dangerous thing. He's the most dangerous thing, according to David Starkey, an anglicized Scot.
Dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Part of this world is that the market crash happens in 1925, probably because World War I is different as a result of America's early entry. Great Depression stuff happens way earlier. There's a bonus army kerfluffle, just like in real life, which makes sense. Veterans, they want money, and they want it sooner than,
I want my money, and I want it now.
J.G. Wentworth.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine. I love the world of commercials where people just do that. It's sort of like they have those things for opening an egg, like the Egg-O-Matic or whatever. And it's don't you have difficulty opening eggs? And it shows someone failing completely at doing an incredibly simple task. They're trying to break an egg, but they break it on top of the stove rather than the pan. These people who are incredibly completely incompetent at doing anything. Don't you have trouble mixing stuff? And this shit is flying all over the place. And it's
like a pizza rolls commercial and someone's putting a pizza into a toaster. Don't do this. Do this.
I've actually heard of stuff like that happening in real life. Where I work, before I worked there, they said that someone wanted to reheat a pizza slice and they stuck it in an actual toaster.
No, please, no, don't.
Come on, people. Come on. It's pretty funny, though. Mm-hmm. But, so this results in basically almost like a civil war breaking out in the United States.
Yeah, there's grassroots anti-government militias that pop up all over the place. And there's two main wings of this movement. There's the Midwest wing, which is the classic populist, silver standard weirdos.
Yeah, only we had silver in our money, everything would be better.
Oh, they also really like Prohibition. That's the Midwest thing. They're big fans of the demon rum, that kind of
hate
thing.
Drinking. So much that they're going to sell their grain to be turned into whiskey.
You hypocrites. And then there's a
They don't have to, they just don't drink it. Here's the thing with Prohibition is that it was just the transportation of alcohol that was banned. You could still make it.
Oh, no. Right. That's correct. There's also another wing of this movement, which is the Southern wing, which is more kind of racist, associated with the Ku Klux Klan and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're both rising up against the government. And the main character of this story is a journalist, not Mark Twain, some other guy who's like a vice journalist because he's like following the he's following the U.S. Army, and then he just decides to switch over and like embed himself with the terrorists.
The gonzo journalism.
Yeah, And it's pretty interesting. The American government kind of reminds me of in those Southern Victory books, like the U.S. going into Utah. They're just being like jerks. They talk about how they quarter soldiers, and it's like, this is against the Constitution.
The Third Amendment has been violated.
Oh my God. I mean, it's the third most important amendment. Free speech, free religion, guns. Quartering soldiers.
No quartering.
No quarter.
My God. Everyone forgets about that one.
Yeah.
It doesn't really happen that much. Although it is incorporated against the states in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals jurisdiction, which would be New York, Vermont, and Connecticut, because during the Attica prison uprising, they quartered state like troopers and guardsmen in people's houses, and they sued, and they're like, yes, the Third Amendment applies to the states. So anywhere else, in Arizona or Montana or Maine, you could quarter National Guardsmen in people's houses, but don't do it in New York. Don't do it, Max.
Don't do it in that circuit court district.
Yeah. You can't do it in Vermont. In Connecticut, they're free from people getting quartered there. But you go over into New Jersey, and they're like, we're quartering everywhere. People are getting quartered everywhere. Oh, my God. It's horrible. The state trooper walks up to your house. It's like, sorry, I got to quarter myself here tonight.
I'm feeling sleepy. I'm going to sleep in your bed right now.
Yeah. You weren't going to eat those hot dogs, were you?
Drinks your beer.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Like all the other important amendments, like the one that bans citizens of one state from suing a state in another state's federal court. The one that everyone was they're really banging down the doors for. The 11th Amendment.
We demand the third Ocala demands. They talked about that. I think
they're like, damn it! If I live in South Carolina and I want to sue the state of Arkansas and the Eastern District of Arkansas, I want to do it. How dare you stop me from doing this?
Constitutional law. Fantastic. Oh, they talk about how these populists that he like embeds with, they have Thompson submachine guns.
Yes.
Yeah, because they a lot of them are connected with the post office.
They said they tried it out in the Postal Wars, which was pretty hilarious. Love it. I'm just imagining someone they're like opening up a mail car, and they're like, I can't wait to steal all this mail. And there's like a mailman. He's like, not today, son. He's got the big drum magazine.
I was watching the original Scarface recently, and that movie's great. It's really good. Made back in the 30s, and there's tons of drum Thompsons all over the place in that movie. It's great. And then at the end of the story, it's this showdown between the United States soldiers led by this Captain Abel or something. Abel is his name. He really he loves Funston. He says Funston's awesome.
Yeah, Fred Funston.
I'm bringing Funston to America now.
Yeah.
And there's this big fight. They talk about how all the dust makes everything look red. And it kind of reminded me of, I think, Los Angeles recently. The sky was blood red because of smoke or dust or something like that. And of course, the populists lose. And it's like this pessimistic ending because the journalist is looking at the future and he's seeing war clouds in Europe. American freedom is just going to degrade even more than it did because of the Great War. So, well, pretty good. Oh yeah, and it happens in the cornfield, and I can't help but think of Gods and Generals.
Oh yeah, the great
the cobs exploding across the screen.
Thank goodness. Oh my goodness, Half Landon, where were you to save him?
Oh yeah. I will say that this story is a little light on mentioning politicians. So it doesn't really say who's the president. Doesn't say. They talk about how this politician is awarding medals to soldiers for this battle that happened in this tiny little town, and I'm like, is this guy supposed to be Alf Landon? Come on.
My dear Alf.
Give me the deets.
Uncle Alf.
Yeah, Uncle
Not that Uncle Alf.
Uncle Alf.
Not that Uncle Alf.
not Turtle Dove's Uncle Alf.
Good stuff. Well,
I also really respect that it does not criticize Herbert Hoover. I do respect that. Thank you, Mr. Alberta.
Hoobie.
Hoobie himself, yeah. Hoobentude, yeah.
Well, next we're going to talk about two stories that are from a
close friend of ours, of both of us, yeah.
We're going to just say it's us, right?
Yeah. We wrote some stories, actually.
Yeah.
We were inspired by all these really cool stories that we're seeing.
So we are going to talk about our contributions So which one do we want to start with, Max? I think we should start with yours.
Sure.
Because I think it's the best. I really do. It's excellent.
I wrote a story called Blood Simple, which is kind of a reference to the title of a Coen Brothers film, Blood Simple.
Yeah, this is Semple, Semple.
Yes, and I think a lot of people know exactly what I'm talking about when you hear simple spelled in that way. I was also thinking about calling it Simple Gifts, like that song, or I don't know, some other pun like that. But it refers to the Bob Simple tank, which was a improvised armored vehicle that was proposed by a Labour politician in New Zealand. He might have been the prime minister. I can't quite remember. But it was like, it's just a tractor with a bunch of corrugated metal slapped on it and a bunch of Bren guns. Like
sticking everywhere, every which direction.
Like 6 Bren guns. One on the front, 2 on each side, and 1 in the back. Something like that. Yes. Yeah. And it's often made fun of and like, oh, it's the worst tank ever and it's just terrible or whatever. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of spin a scenario in which this sort of thing might actually have to be used. So like the story is set in Queensland, Australia, which is like
1943.
1943, yeah.
It's the Australian state north of New South Wales where Sydney is. So that's Brisbane and Cairns and stuff like that are in Queensland.
Mm-hmm. And I did that because I was trying to think like a reasonable place for a battle to happen. It's up in the north near New Guinea. Mm-hmm. And in this story, it's World War II, I should say. And the Japanese are on the war path. China's not even mentioned. They're winning in India. They've gone past Imphal, and they're in like Calcutta.
Mm-hmm. Street fighting in Calcutta. I think you mentioned that.
Yeah,
and the United States is not in the war. Alf Landon kept them out of the war.
Yes, he kept us out of war. Yes,
and it talks about how they're selling like American weapons to both sides.
Yeah.
The Germans are fighting. I think it talks about somewhere there's fighting in North Africa and in Russia. The U.S. is still strictly neutral. The Japanese have invaded Australia.
Things are looking very bad for Great Britain. But here, the Australians have to hold on and keep the Japanese at bay, keep them from overrunning them. So
it's like there's some infantry unit, and then all of a sudden these new tanks arrive from New Zealand, these boxy monstrosities.
And they're like, oh, I don't know if this is going to be useful. And it's like, no, it'll definitely be useful. And so like they range them along the line. There's like a Japanese,
basically like a bonsai charge.
Yeah, a kyokusai, a shattered jewel, human wave attack or whatever. And they work great.
Yeah, the tanks like counterattack, and they actually work. They're like moving through it. The guns are mowing them down left and right.
Because it's like, they don't have a lot of anti-tank weapons, and this is barely a tank. Your Arasaka is only going to be so good.
Just can't punch through this corrugated sheet metal.
This mighty 14-gauge sheet metal.
And I like how like the guy who's coordinating them, they don't have radios in him, so he's using like flags, and he's like doing these like flag signals, and like some guys he's like he waves 2 purple flags, 1 perpendicular one, and then the other guy is like waves back with a green flag or whatever, and they actually works against them until Japanese tanks show up.
Yeah, if I cannot remember, I think it's a Ha-Go or a Ha-Go like looms over the horizon, and it's like, oh, this mighty Ha-Go, no.
And I like it. At one point it shoots at one of them and it caroms off of it, but it like knocks one of the like sides of the tank off, so the guy's like standing there with like the Bren gun in his hand, where the whole side of it is like exposed.
Yeah, I was quite proud of that. There's also a man with a lunge mine. The Japanese, like I said, they didn't have very good anti-tank equipment, and one of the things they improvised was basically a shaped charge at the end of a bamboo stick, and it's basically a suicide weapon.
It's a suicide mine, yeah.
Yeah, there's like 2 prongs at the end. They jam it into the tank, it blows up, and the guy's like basically certain to die because of the pressure wave.
But then all of it looks like all is lost. But then these Australian tanks, what's the name of them?
Sentinel tanks.
Sentinel tanks show up, and they destroy the Ha-Go, and they drive them back. And but the Sentinel tank, it's a good place for a picture, has an interesting protrusion on the front of it that holds its machine gun.
A very peculiar barrel shroud.
Yeah. It looked like a dick. There's no other way around it. And seeing one of these in person, which I have seen at the Tank Museum in Bovington, it is, you look at it and you're like, is this a joke? Did someone at the museum like...
I think I mentioned like it looks like they're pissing fire on the enemy.
Yeah. But the mighty sentinel.
Yes. They push them, and then the Japanese start routing, and then they're like, onward to
Cairns, to Port Moresby, and then on to Tokyo. I thought it was so funny.
Also, they talk about they're fighting in like this charred forest, this eucalyptus forest that burned down. Because, Australia has fires all the time.
It does. But what I like, too, is that I remember looking up, because I'm a Google Maps fiend. I love Google Maps.
Maps are great.
They are, because they give you a great sense of like if I'm ever going somewhere, I like try to look it up if I can, and it brings it to life. Except if you try to go to Germany, because apparently they don't let Google Maps do stuff any newer than like 2008. So.
Yeah, if you look at the Street View, everything's from 2008. I think because of some litigation or something.
Probably some privacy thing.
Europeans love doing that kind of stuff.
Well, other places aren't. But the thing is that on Google Maps, actually, I looked it up, and you picked a place that is like a natural choke point. There's coral sea on one side and mountains on the other. So it is like a natural point where the Japanese would have to go through. They couldn't just like go around this position.
Unless they're going through featureless, endless desert.
Yeah. So, and it's so much, it's so well written. It's kind of cheeky. I really like it. And I'm not saying that just because I'm your friend and we do this sort of work. It really is well written.
Thank you.
And it's like about 8 pages. So it's got some heft to it, but it's not overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It's funny at times, and it has some good hints at world building, which I always like, but you don't have to explain the whole thing. And it hints at like a world where the British and the Russians are going to get pushed really hard. The Japanese are probably not going to get completely defeated. Because it talks, I like how you mentioned Alfreds. They're like B-25 copies that have been burning like Sydney and stuff like that.
That's right. I forgot. Yes. Yeah.
Great story. I really like it, and I think it's the better of the two stories that we wrote.
And one of the people is like, why don't we torpedo these American ships going to Tokyo? And it's like, well, you do that, say goodbye to your corned beef hash and your Hershey's tropical chocolate and your
I love it. Yeah,
in your rations.
Oh man,
I was
great!
Proud of that.
Yeah, and I love the idea of it's the one time a Semple tank would work against a human wave attack. Seriously.
And it's a desperation measure,
And it works, but it actually makes sense that it would work. And it's, of course, on all sides. The guns are just blazing away on all sides. And it totally works. They're surrounded. They can't miss. There's just this human wave of people.
There's like a guy with a samurai sword that jumps on it, and he's like trying to stab through the porthole or whatever.
No, he does. No, it's when the tank, the side of it gets knocked off, and then he like stabs a guy in the back, one of the gunners, but then some famous Australian sniper from World War I like blows his head off.
Bobby Singh, I think his name is, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And he's like, Singh? He doesn't look Indian. He's like, I think part Chinese or something.
And it hints at this really cool world, but it doesn't have to explain it, which is easy. It's nice on the writer, because I'll tell you, when you're trying to flesh out this whole world, it's tough.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have we unfortunately, our schedules don't allow us. I wish we had more time to write, but we don't.
Oh my God. Yeah. Recently, it's insane. Yeah. My sanity depends on the price of steel remaining the same in my job, I should say. And
we won't say anything more.
I won't say anything more. It's
and by the price of steel,
secret.
He means the price of used copies of the movie Steel.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. My sanity depends on that, and I don't think I'm going to be sane for very long. Right. Oh my God, it's crazy. Oh my goodness. Yes. But your story.
Yes.
Let's do that.
Yes. My story: a Missouri Yankee in King Alfonso's court.
I love that title. It's awesome.
Well,
even though he's not a Yankee, he's a Yankee.
He's a Yankee in the broadest sense of being a Yankee.
Yeah.
Well, my story involves Mark Twain.
The great Mark Twain.
Great Mark Twain.
Yes. Who cannot stop being a character in these alternate history stories.
He's just such a great character.
He's so perfect.
Well, Mark Twain makes an appearance. And my story is set in 1898, during the middle of the Spanish-American War. And we see General Mark Twain of the Spanish Army.
Oh my God.
Fighting against the United States.
In Cuba. He's
in Cuba.
Yes.
Santiago, Cuba. So Mark Twain actually was not against really the Spanish-American War. He was against the Philippine-American War that came afterwards. But in my story, some divergence before 1898 that gets us to this ridiculous divergence. A divergence that when I showed it to somebody, they read it and they said, this isn't really alternate history. This is history fan fiction. And I said, no, it isn't. It's alternate history. And they said, well, what you did is you just took somebody from history and just made them do whatever you wanted. So that's history fan fiction. And I said, you're right.
Yeah.
But it is fun.
There's a lot of that kind of stuff where it's like, why are you doing this? This makes no sense.
It does. But
I love it, though. It's great.
You have to be serious in so much of your life. And, so the divergence is sometime before this point, Mark Hanna gets elected president of the United States. Mark Hanna was a famous political operative who actually was senator from Ohio for a little while, but he was very much linked in with Roscoe Conkling, which was this idea of sort of to the victors go the spoils, like, give away patronage, akin to Tammany Hall.
Roscoe Conkling, sorry, one thing. Fatty Arbuckle, his real name was Roscoe Conkling Arbuckle, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And he was named that because his dad hated Roscoe Conkling or something. Maybe I'm getting that backwards. And it's like, I hate my son, so I'm going to name him after a guy I also hate or something like that.
Wow. Talking about cutting off your nose to spite your face. Talking about cutting off someone else's nose to spite your face. So basically, Mark Hanna becomes president. So the Maine blows up in Havana Harbor. And I guess because of Hanna being maybe stuff he's been doing before, Mark Twain is a little less disposed towards the U.S. government. And he talks about, I have him talk about how, and the story opens with him at this general's meeting, and he has like a translator and all that. And basically, long story short is that the Maine blows up, and he talks about how calls went out to avenge the Maine and to conquer Cuba and annex it into the United States. And he says, like, I just can't stand for it. So he goes to London, and he publishes some newspaper articles saying, like, I'm going to shock America into like make them realize that this is crazy, or shock them into realizing this is nuts. We should come to some sort of an agreement. So I'm going to say I support Spain in this. And well, it backfires because people burn his house down and everyone hates him and he can't go back. So the Spanish invite him to come to Madrid, and he goes to Madrid because he's got nowhere else to go. And he writes some articles talking, and this is all described very quickly. The story's probably about 8 pages as well. It's about the same length as Max's, and that are like anti-American, pro-Spanish. And he gets invited to see King Alfonso. And he gets there and he's like, oh, well, Senor Twain, everyone talks about how talented you are. Like, I'm going to make you a general because you talked about your military experience. Mark Twain had briefly served in a Confederate regiment in the Civil War, but then deserted. And he's like, oh, no, shit. And then they make him a caudillo, and he's like decked out in all these like medals and this with a sword.
Yeah, he's got a sword. I love it.
And then he gets sent to Santiago. He becomes a commander of a unit there.
And you mentioned the actual commander there as well.
Arsenio Linares. I looked it up.
Yeah.
And basically everyone hates him because they're like, what the?
Why are you
And
here?
then so he basically goes back from this meeting where they make fun of him, and he commands the troops that are on San Juan Hill, around that blockhouse in that area. And then he also talks about how like he tries to suggest like, oh, we should attack the Americans to catch them off guard. And they're like, how well did that work out at Las Guasimas recently? And he's like, "Rrr." And Las Guasimas was actually kind of like a defeat for the Americans, but here because he's incompetent, the Spanish. Long story short is, so we get to the point of he's on top of this and he's talking to his commanders. And he's like, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to attack the Americans. We're going to surprise them. And they're all like, that's a bad idea. And he's like, we're doing it. And they attack.
I'm the caudillo here.
He's like, basically, yeah. And he attacks, and everything seems great for a second until the Gatling guns open up, because the Americans use Gatling guns in real life to suppress the Spanish, and they get just cut to shreds.
As seen in Deadliest Warrior, of course.
That's right.
Yes.
Mark Twain, weapon book.
Vickers machine gun, bad. Not as good as a Gatling gun. Much better.
Yeah. So the Gatling guns and artillery and rifle fire just tear them to shreds. And Mark Twain is just like, ugh. Like all these commanding officers get killed, and he's like retreating, and he's back on the top of San Juan Hill, and he's just, it's like, oh my God, here they come. And he like shoots at the Americans, and he like hits one guy, and then he sees Teddy Roosevelt like aiming a rifle at him.
His glasses are gleaming. They're like bright white.
And then he's like, he tries to shoot him, and he gets shot. And then he wakes up, and it's the next year, 1899, Auburn Prison, New York. And Mark Twain is sitting in his cell, and he's been tried for treason. And he talks about how he thought, like, he's like, I half expected they would have given me life at hard labor because I helped made it easier for them to win through my stupidity. But he gets condemned, and he gets condemned to the electric chair, which was a real form of execution that existed in the 1890s. His hair gets shaved off. One of his jailers is Leon Kolgosh,
who was also executed by
electric chair in New York, because it was Buffalo where he assassinated William McKinley
at the Temple of Music or something like that. It was like at the World's Fair or something.
So Mark Twain, he
an Ivor Johnson revolver.
That's right, yeah.
concealed under a handkerchief. Like, take a look at this.
Yes, take this. So he gets his head shaved and all that, and he gets brought to the electric chair. And there's President Hanna and Governor McKinley and Theodore Roosevelt all hanging out there to watch him. And they strap him in, and they're like, "You have any last words?" And he's like, "I just want to say," and he shouts out, "Mark Twain," which is, that's the name Mark Twain comes from what riverboat captain, someone would throw like a measure to measure the depth of the river, and they'd say Mark Twain. That means like how many fathoms, like not fathom, I don't know, whatever. And whatever. And maybe this isn't the best ending to a story, but he screams it out, and everyone's just like, what? And then he just smiles at them. The hood falls, and then the electricity gets turned on, and all goes to black.
Pull the lever, yeah.
So, why I chose to end my story like this, I don't know, because I thought it would be I thought of what's the most absolutely ridiculous way, because at first I was going to end it with him just getting shot by Teddy Roosevelt. I also I actually talked about the premise for this story, and you talked about like, what if he actually like escapes? So Mark Twain was born in 1835. So let's set it 1936. He's 101 years old, living in Spain, and he like, the Spanish nationalists come for them because they're so pissed at what he did. Like, like throw him out of his wheelchair off of a balcony or something like that.
Jose Estrella is here to
something crazy like that. But I thought it was, I mean, is this the most accurate alternate history? No. Is this the best? No. Honestly, Max's and a lot of the stories we got were better than mine. But it was fun. It was funny.
I love it. It's
and
fantastic.
The image of Mark Twain. I mean, and it really, but it also catches onto like this trend of where some alternate history, which is where like you take somebody and you're like, I'm just going to make this historical figure do whatever I want them to do. And you know what? I'll be honest, it was more fun writing the story like that.
And that ending, I just love the ludicrousness of the electric chair. It's just, I never thought I'd see the day.
Mark Twain getting executed in the electric chair for treason against the United States for fighting for the Spanish in the Spanish-American War.
I love it.
Granted, there's not a lot of Spanish-American War alternate history out there.
There should be, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an interesting time.
I'll write more, but every one of them will end with the person getting executed in the electric chair. That's just how it has to end now.
In the footnotes mention how Mark Twain was in a tragic water heater explosion or something, died.
Every story you write, Mark Twain gets killed in some horror.
He went on an African safari and was eaten by a hippo when he was swimming in the river. Oh no, help me.
Oh no. Well, it's eaten by a hippo. Oh my god. Well, but I will say it's easier to write that. It's easier to write a story like that where you just go off the wall. It was fun though. I will say I enjoyed the exercise of it.
Mm-mm. Writing is fun.
It is fun.
And gosh, like you were saying, I'm just almost a little jealous of how good some of these stories we've gotten are. I mean, they are like shockingly well done.
Yeah, I really liked some of the twists to play off, and everyone really, just other than the emu one, stayed within the parameters. No. Well, yeah, but we're not actually. But they also did another one that was good. But
I loved. I really did like that Romney one quite a bit.
The Romney one was really good. I really enjoyed the work that we got, and we'll look through and see if there's any more that we feel like we want to talk about. But I
mean, we've gotten so many. I'm sure there are. But yeah, we'll come back to fan submitted short stories either in a new contest or just returning to stuff that we already have.
Yeah. No, this was great. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And we were so happy with the stuff that we got from you all.
Yeah.
Really, really proud of our fan base.
Yeah, I really am too. You guys are awesome.
We'll be working on figuring out what's next. We're going to do more stories, or we'll come up with a new divergence to talk about.
I love it.
But remember, when you write a story, always end it with Mark Twain getting executed.
And while writing under the influence of throat discs, I'm not going to make any promises, but it might stimulate your creativity. Who knows?
That's right.
Yes.
And huckleberry milkshakes.
And huckleberry milkshakes. Those could be good too. If you're ever in Idaho. Boise, visit the Basque Center there. Very good.
When I think Basque, I think Boise.
Exactly.
Well, this is Matt signing off.
And this is Max signing off.
Have a great day, guys.